It's one of the most wonderful things when you can explain to somebody like your past doesn't define you, nor does that.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I think that that's what gets people stuck, frankly. Often they think it's the wrong strategy or tactics. And what I find more often than not, and I'm sure you are the same way, when you say, yeah, your flaws don't need to define your future, right? Your past doesn't need to define your future. Where most people get stuck is in some combination of emotional triggers and behavioral patterns. Mm-hmm. It's cycles that repeat in their life, and they don't ever find a way to free themselves of it. So they may reach crazy levels of success with how the world has defined it financially, right? They may have these things, but then they're miserable. They're lost. They're an empty shell of who they are. And they've just denied so many pieces of that. And it's the emotional triggers and behavioral patterns that keep them stuck in that self-defeating pattern. You don't have to be defined by what has happened or the experiences in your life. You can use them as fuel. And that's where this whole concept of embracing pain to avoid suffering comes from. If we embrace the pain of digging into those things, of saying yes to unpacking the shame and understanding how that's impacted us in our lives, understanding where scarcity and fear maybe have come up, where self-worth issues have come up in our lives, and we move those to a place of conscious awareness so we can be intentional with them, then we can free ourselves of it.
Yeah, and that's a very liberating place to be. And oftentimes it blows me away that people, if they just take a second to step away from that history and those things that they felt define them, instantly that light turns on. It's like, wow, you're right. And I feel bad almost that I had to be the person, however many years later, to expose that. And I think what's wonderful about these shows and your story is that hopefully people hear this sooner than later and go,
right.
those things don't define me. I could be different than what I feel like my drawbacks are.
Yeah, and those things don't have to define you, and you also don't have to allow the world to define you. Right? That is one of the things that kills me the most. I was privy to it. Almost every one of us have been on the receiving end of this. We're born as the most authentic, burning light that we will ever be. You've got kids, right?
Yeah.
I've got kids. Like, you see how raw they are when they come out. They're pure. They're not messed up yet. And then as they get older, what do? Parents, teachers, coaches, employers. Well, you should do this. You shouldn't do that. You should do this. Well, you should be that. No. You can't be that. You shouldn't even go near that. Right? And we start to just put these layers on top of people until they're ultimately literally an empty shell of who they are that's carrying around armor because they're afraid to be vulnerable. And that armor is crushing who they are even further. And it becomes a compounding issue. So I know what I find is, like, often when we actually help people see themselves more clearly, say yes to who they are, it's about shedding those layers so they can get back to be a more authentic burning light like they were early in life. And when that starts to happen, that's when joy, freedom, and fulfillment comes in. And all of a sudden, you start seeing health flourishing, relationships flourishing, business flourishing. And by the way, I say that very cautiously. That's not like a guarantee. You got to put in the work to do it. But if you put in the work, you can really get on the other side of what keeps so many of us stuck and not feeling like who we are.
Well, and by the way, it takes work to stay stuck as well. And I think we don't realize that.
Fact.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your business career. I mean, you mentioned some highlights on some of your financial success, but talk a little bit about your business career and how it transpired from one thing into what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I spent 15 years in risk management and employee benefits consulting, 5 with a publicly traded firm that, I learned a whole lot, right? I came right out of school and did insurance, which I don't think anybody grows up wanting to do, me included. I fell into it. But I came out bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and said, I'm going to take over the world, right? Like, not having any clue what that meant. I was going to climb the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
And fortunately had early opportunities to do so and had some early success. I won't go too into detail, but what I realized after getting myself into certain rooms and getting some clarity as to where I was and how I was doing it, I just was out of alignment for where I was and how I wanted to build my business. And so ended up finding an opportunity, moved to a place where I could go in as a partner and really help build and scale something, which was incredible. And that served me very well. I learned and grew exponentially in that time, not having any idea what it was like to build something essentially from the ground up. We were part of a larger ecosystem, so we had resources, but it was basically me and another person on an island when I joined, and we had to figure out over the course of the next 10 years how to scale that to have a full team. We had over 60 associates by the time I left within 10 years, which was beautiful. The more I did it, I fortunately had reached some level of success, but what turned me down this path is I was really good at burning the candle at both ends. And I was really good at applying mental toughness and having that intellectual narrative to drive us towards success in life. Mm-hmm. But then we had kids, and it became very real that what I had always talked about wanting to build was not in alignment with what I was doing. And what I mean by that is I said to myself that everything I was doing professionally was for the benefit of my family, right? I wanted to give my wife the freedom to choose whether or not to work and what and how she wanted to do that. I wanted my kids to not ever be defined by what our resources would limit them to, but be able to give them opportunities that I didn't have and had to work for early. And all that's great. But when I missed the first 6 months of my son's life like that, because I never went through the process of readjusting pre-kids to post-kids, I was fortunate enough to have that moment of realization where I said, okay, I don't have the skill set, I don't have the intellect, and I don't have the right mentors or people in my life to help me figure this out. So I went on a search to hire my first coach, which I did. I interviewed, by the way, 14 of them. And most of them were an inch deep and a mile wide and didn't have any relevance or credibility towards what I needed. And so that's the only reason I interviewed so many is I was about to be like, okay, well, I guess a coach can't help me either. And then I landed with somebody that hit real hard.
Yeah.
And it was the first month working with him. He said, Brian, you got to be doing this. I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, speaking and coaching. He goes, dude, you build businesses, you build people, like you're coaching people constantly. You're on stage multiple times a month telling your story in a way to help people. Like why not shift that through a lens that could have a bigger impact? And I was like, yeah, whatever, dude. I'm paying you a lot of money not to tell me how great I am, but tell me figure out these other things. Like, pack it. Let's talk later. Kept working with him and he kept trickling it every month, right? Every month for about 9 months. And then the world sent me a sign over the course of 30 days that I could not refuse. Mm-hmm. And I had to answer the question, is this complementary or conflicting to where I'm heading? I felt like it was complementary, so I jumped in with both feet. And I was humbled and rewarded instantaneously by just kind of hanging my hat that I'm doing this. And I started to get a steady flow of coaching clients and speaking events from the network that I'd established. Beautiful. Ran those businesses side by side for 5 years. And the more I did coaching, the more I wanted to do coaching. It's a completely different game because my wins are other people's wins, which to me is like way more gratifying than winning for myself.
For sure.
It's like a whole different level of fulfillment when you can see how you can help facilitate someone breaking through their own barriers. You know this as well as I do. I don't do the work. I don't take the credit for the success. They have to put in the work, but I can guide them along the way. I don't need to be their hero. I want them to be their own hero. And so I teach them to elevate and empower them to be able to apply the concepts in their life in a sustainable way. And that's what becomes cool. Summer of 2019, my wife and I went away. We had one of the best weekends we've ever had, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. Like we were like one, man. And she said to me as we were driving back to pick up our kids, how would you feel if you didn't have to go to the office on Monday morning? And I was like flooded with fear, right? Like just flooded. And I was like, babe, that's a loaded question. Can you tell me more? I had some other health stuff that affected me a few years back, and I'm good now. But she ultimately said, I think you let fear enter into your world in a way I've never seen it. Mm-hmm. And I think that you've convinced yourself that we need the money, the prestige, the status of the business that we've built. And she said, I'm here to tell you, I don't care if we live in a cardboard box. What I do need is you. And what I'm seeing is that you're dying a little bit inside every day you live in insurance. She said, I also know through your coaching work that that's where your gifts are. And I don't even think you're scratching the surface of your potential nor the impact you want to have on this planet. And so she essentially gave me a push and permission to lean in. And it was the next 3 months I unpacked what that looked like. And it was September of 2019. I communicated to my business partners that I was going to leave at the end of that fiscal year, which was May of 2020, execute my buy sell and commit myself fully to this path. So I crammed a whole lot there into a few minutes, but that's really what the evolution looked like as it related to where and how this impacted my professional life and where and how I'm now doing this full time. And I'll tell you definitively, I am more free. I am more fulfilled. I am happier. And I feel more like myself now than I have in my entire life. Yeah. And it's really cool that when we align ourselves with the who, right? 100% who we are, the what becomes a manifestation of the who. I chased the what my prior period of life, what house, what car, what amount of money, and I lost my who. And it was only through this intrinsic work that I found myself. And now I believe that everything that follows this will be a byproduct of who I am and the impact I want to have on the world.
I picked up 3 things out of there that I want to share with our listeners, and you can weigh in on them. And what's interesting about the 3 things that I picked up on is you have success in what you're doing based on your model of success. I have my values similar. For me, it was about God, family, health, giving back, time, and business being last, right? And that family is way up there at the top, right? Literally. And what's interesting to me in my transition of careers, similar to yours, I had a coach. I had launched a podcast to support my direct-to-consumer business. And after my very first show, I went to my coach, David Meltzer, and I said, wow, I got 3 calls today about asking for advice based on my podcast show. I didn't expect that. I'm trying to sell more wine online. He goes, Jim, you should be a coach. That's what they're calling for. They hear that. You're inspiring them, similar to what your coach had told you. And what's interesting about that, or the point I wanted to make, is we were encouraged to follow a path that somebody else saw in us and we didn't see in ourselves, right?
100%. And by the way, he also told me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Because I literally told him to stop, and he continued to push. I needed it, and I'm forever indebted to him for that.
Yeah.
Because he encouraged me down a path that I didn't see for myself.
It's just amazing that oftentimes we're focused on something that we think is the prize when somebody on the outside says, actually, the prize is over here. You're not even looking at it.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
I love that. So I think, the first thing I wanted to point out is if somebody's trying to give you a message, open your ears up, listen to them. Maybe it's the right message, right?
That's right.
The second thing that I wanted to point out, and I received the same from mine, and that was your spouse encouraging you and identifying who you are and what they felt was important to you. And not only did you have what sounds like a spouse that was your rock, but also your encourager as well. And I had the same when I transitioned out of my career. And what a wonderful role to play. And I guess I would just say, if you're a spouse to somebody else, that's a great role to be in for them.
100%. And it's not lost on me the courage it took for her to disrupt her entire life, to walk away from the stability we built for the sake of having me. 100%. Like, that's not lost on me at all. I got chills as soon as you brought up my wife as being one of the big takeaways.
Yeah.
And to her credit on a whole variety of things, I say publicly, I get credit externally for who we are as a couple. Meaning the wisdom, the patterns in human behavior, the thought processes, the abstract and esoteric thinking that creates a lot of my content. 50% of it's me. The other half is my wife.
Yeah. Sure.
Right. And so I wouldn't be who I am doing what I do if it was not for my partner. And so it's not something I take lightly. And I'm grateful that you picked up on that.
Well, I picked up on it because I lived it as well. I created a brand in the alcohol business, and it was my identity. And I met my current wife at the tail end of that. And she says, hey, this isn't who you are. And by the way, the people that have invested in your company are making you somebody who you're not. And she literally said the same thing yours did.
Wow.
I'll live in a cardboard box for you to be happy and not become somebody who I didn't fall in love with, right? And, it just was such a powerful statement. And it's amazing how our wives can really define the moment, right? And have that impact. And I think as husbands, we can do the same, and we should encourage one another. And I hope this message bleeds across both sides of the fence here to be that
But
person.
again, to the point that you talked about before, it's if you're listening, if you choose to listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because again, my coach pushed me down a path and encouraged me to do something. My wife pushed me down a path and encouraged me to do something. Both those moments I could have refused and said no to. Same thing for you. You could have refused those and been like, nope, I'm here. This is what I'm doing. This is who I am. But you had 2 people, one a paid coach and a friend and a mentor, and the second as a spouse that are like, no. Like, this isn't who you are, Jim. Mm-hmm. And that's way more empowering if you can actually listen.
Yeah, absolutely. The final thing I pulled away is, you talk about having a plan, right? So here you are with the plan. I'm looking at the results of your plan. Your website is up. All the things that you offer, all the things that you do, all the lives that you're impacting are because you had a plan. You listened.
That's right.
You were supported, and you created a plan around it. And here you are beyond that plan, succeeding in a way that you wanted to succeed for the values that you have. And those are just so great components of your story. And I love that you were able to share that with us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I love the 3 things you picked up. Those are powerful points.
Well, I've taken a bunch of your time, well, at least 30 minutes of it, and I would love to can you walk us through your website briefly, the things that you offer, where people can find you and where they can grow? By the way, your bullet points here, your quick videos, I'm in love with that, so that's going to be part of my routine to check in on you and what you're doing on these bullet points.
Thank you very much. So brianbogert.com is a place where you can find almost everything that's going on in our ecosystem. Bogert's Bullets is something that I started way long ago, and I paused it for a little bit because I didn't have my most authentic voice. So if you go back and watch the really early ones, content's good, but delivery is completely different than today. And so, yeah.